Hello everyone, B.O.R.G Dexter here, and in this video I will be reviewing Capcom's newest entry into the Resident Evil series, Resident Evil 9 Requiem. Resident Evil is a survival horror game in which you have to navigate zombie-infected areas, seeking items to open locked doors or solve puzzles, all the while managing your weapons, ammo and healing items in your inventory. A quick history of me regarding the Resident Evil series. I played Resident Evil 1 through 9, Code Veronica and the remakes of 2 and 3. I didn't really like Resident Evil 4 back in the day because of the heavier action at the cost of the horror atmosphere, though in retrospect, especially compared to Resident Evil 5 and 6, it was actually good. Resident Evil 5 and 6 were disasters in my opinion. Resident Evil 7 was a step in the right direction and was noticeably better. And Resident Evil 8 kinda went back a bit and was more action heavy, and for me it came below Resident Evil 7. From the get-go in Resident Evil Requiem, you take on the role of Grace Ashcroft, an FBI intelligence analyst that is sent by her boss to the Wrenwood Hotel to investigate a new murder that has taken place there, and the victims are displaying the same weird symptoms to some previous similarly strange cases. The task is especially challenging for Grace since 8 years ago she barely escaped that same hotel with her life, while her mother Alyssa Ashcroft was killed right in front of her eyes, traumatizing Grace, understandably. After a short walk in the city streets, you will reach the Wrenwood Hotel, and after a short while Grace will realize that something is off, since the burned down hotel is full of pictures of her and Alyssa, her late mother, indicating that Grace is being lured there by someone, and that someone is Victor Gideon, a former Umbrella researcher, saying Grace is some kind of key in his mysterious quest. We then take control of the series' iconic Leon Scott Kennedy, now somewhat aged though still in good shape, with the caveat that his health seems to be taking a turn for the worse due to some sort of illness manifested in a sort of rash visible on his neck and hand. He proceeds to try and stop Victor from kidnapping Grace, and he in turn infects a few people, unleashing another zombie mess-up. Fact that is, by the way, largely ignored throughout the rest of the game. Grace will then need to escape the care center where she was taken to with the help of Leon, and then will end up in the legendary Raccoon City after a string of events. To be honest, before playing the game I was a bit afraid that the game will be underwhelming, considering that the game is divided into more horror-type sections with Grace and action-heavy parts with Leon, kind of like a have the cake and eat it type of thing. I am happy to report though that Capcom nailed the balance almost perfectly. Grace's sections are more sensitive to resource wasting, the atmosphere is tense and stressful, inventory space is much more limited, weapons cannot be upgraded. Grace will need to be much more stealthy, crafty and resourceful to overcome enemies and other obstacles. He also makes use of storage boxes and uses ink ribbons to save via typewriters when playing on classic difficulty or higher, along the fact that autosaves on this difficulty are more rare. Leon's sections meanwhile are very action heavy with more ammo, a much bigger inventory, and weapons are upgradable also. Enemies will feel more like targets or victims rather than obstacles to avoid, especially after you get a bit better at the game and on subsequent playthroughs. Crafting with Leon is limited to making healing items and ammo. This badass action hero-like feeling is only intensified by the fact that Leon has a hatchet or an axe that he can sharpen, complete with an enviable melee moveset, with much bigger weapon variety including shotguns, SMGs, snipers and the like. Very rarely I felt a bit annoyed with Leon's sections when, in my opinion, enemies were a tiny bit too overbearing, meaning there were too many at once, especially towards the end of the game. There's this section where you will face almost 10 liquor enemies in the span of 5 minutes. But then I look back to Resident Evil 5 and 6 and even Resident Evil 4 and realize that the number of enemies is bearable. Grace's sections though are damn near perfect, especially at the beginning, when resources are tight and everything is new. I was sweating bullets and was jump scared more than once. But rather than overly relying on cheap jump scares, Resident Evil 9 makes heavy use of sound, lighting, and enemies to craft an amazing horror atmosphere. Okay, let's get down to gameplay a bit deeper, describing gameplay for each character. Grace first. Grace has a pistol and the occasional makeshift melee weapon, and sometimes a hunting knife. She relies heavily on crafting that uses collected blood that is sometimes spawned by killed enemies and can also be found in fixed locations in buckets or a tub, for example. She uses the blood and scrap, mostly, to make bullets for the pistol or the Requiem Magnum gifted to her by Leon shortly after the beginning of the game, though crafting Magnum ammo requires rare metals to be crafted. She can also make hemolytic injectors, I guess that's how you pronounce it, lethal injections that kill even the most powerful enemies in one hit, though some more prominent enemies require multiple doses, like Chunk, a big fat zombie roaming the halls of the care center. But in order to apply these injectors, you need to sneak up behind an enemy without being noticed. These injectors can also be used on already killed enemies to prevent them from mutating and coming back again as mutated and stronger zombies. You will also need to use the ingrained obsessions of certain zombies, like the zombies throughout the halls of the care centers that hate lights that are turned on and will rush to a light switch to turn off any lights that Grace turns on, giving you a way to distract these zombies and sneak past them, saving some resources. Grace can also craft steroids, for example, after learning the recipe for it by analyzing blood samples with a microscope via a minigame that increases her max HP. Near the start of the game, you will be able to find multiple blood samples in test tubes, which will then need to be taken to a microscope. After completing a small puzzle minigame, you will unlock new things to craft, a neat little mechanic. Resource and inventory management is also more prominent with Grace, with her being the only one that can make use of the iconic storage boxes and uses ink ribbons on the classical difficulty or classic difficulty or higher to save the game on typewriters. Grace is also by default played from first person, though later I switched to third person when playing with her. She is much less confident, composed, and physically fit, mirrored in her movements, often tripping over in critical situations, and getting scared more easily and often, which is understandable for her age and inexperience. Overall, an amazing survival horror experience like the Resident Evil games of old, when playing with Grace. Leon, on the other hand, is a gruff veteran, though still retaining a sense of humor, approaching the zombie problem more directly. He has a varied set of weapons, shotguns, SMGs, pistols, snipers, and the like. After a certain point in the story, and from the very beginning from the second playthrough onwards, Leon will be able to buy ammo, healing items, weapons, and upgrade them, and the hatchet is also upgradable. Stealth kills are also available with the hatchet. Finishers are also a cool element of combat and can be triggered if, say, you smack a zombie against a wall and then finish it off with the hatchet. Finishers can also be triggered by weapons when you shoot just before the zombie hits, with awesome results. You can also opt to take on enemies with melee only, flashing at zombies with the hatchet, and you can even parry, which will stun enemies, leaving them open to brutal finishers, which can help you save ammo, if done right. Zombies can now wield melee weapons, and sometimes firearms too, and sometimes decide to throw it at you, which you can try to parry or avoid. After killing a zombie that wielded a melee weapon, you have the option to grab the weapon and throw it at a nearby enemy or swing it once at an enemy. Whether you swing or throw the weapon depends on the weapon itself. This makes the combat flow better and makes it much more dynamic, similar to how it does so in Ghost of Yotei, for example. After a bit of practice, you will be stringing badass combos of finishers, shots, and throwing weapons to dispatch of zombies quickly and efficiently. Certain sections with Leon also allow you to unleash your inner Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre if you manage to approach and actually pick up that goddamn chainsaw, resulting in some enjoyable rampages. Zombies are now also much more memorable and diversified. Zombies in Resident Evil Requiem have remnants of their former personalities and often roam about the place doing their jobs. Maids will clean, the big cook will work in and around the kitchen, doctors will be in the OR, patients are also out and about the care center. Some zombies will go around rushing to turn off light switches, like some cheapskate boomer yelling to save electricity. This is a very cool addition, making the often mindless zombies more human, interesting, and therefore, in my opinion, more creepy. Aside from zombies having some semblance of a personality and a job, there are various types of enemies too. The appearance of quote-unquote regular zombies will change depending on the location, having doctors, nurses, and patients in the care center, while later on you will have armored, tough, ex-soldier zombies that are tough cookies. Lickers are also back and are menacing and ugly as ever. The game also features more powerful enemies that could be described as mini-bosses, like the Big Cook or Chunk, a big-boned, so to say, mass of zombie flesh. These zombies are tougher to take on than regular enemies, but hemolytic injectors make quick work of these stronger enemies too, though Chunk will need several doses to free him from all his worldly woes. Overall, enemies are varied, scary, and interesting, more so than perhaps ever. A few times, especially with Leon, you will be faced with what I like to call wave defense sections, where you will face off zombies attacking you in waves, though the number of enemies is nothing too big. Rather, the difference is you need to kill them all to progress further. I thought I would hate this, but I never really minded, and on my first playthrough, these sections served as decent challenges, because resources were tight. Another good thing about the game are the bosses. These fights are cool looking, interesting, if a bit easier than I would have liked. I am talking about actual bosses that you have a one-time fight with, not more prominent and powerful enemies like Chunk in the halls of the care center, or the rare chainsaw-wielding zombie lunatic. Some boss fights take full advantage of nostalgia and member berries, with one, sadly way too short, boss fight being really badass and cool. Gameplay mechanics for defeating these boss fights are, with one or two exceptions, nothing special. In some fights you will need to make heavy use of parrying, but that's about it for gameplay being unique for these fights. Rather, the boss fights rely on looking cool, being full of fun action or a great horror atmosphere, making them memorable and a highlight of the game. When you are not killing or avoiding zombies, you will be on the lookout for the next key or item that will enable you to progress further. The map is of great use when navigating spaces and is, so to say, intelligent, marking all the blocked or locked doors with the fact that the map remembers what kind of lock it is, whether it be an optional drawer that requires a lockpick to be opened or a fuse box for an elevator, for example. Another cool thing is that inaccessible closets with warped doors, for example, which can only be opened by Leon, do not show up on the map while playing with Grace, but will only show up when playing with Leon, which is a great quality of life feature. Compliments to the devs for the map. I have noticed that this Resident Evil game has a lack of puzzles compared to the older Resident Evil games. There are some puzzles, but I would like more. To progress, you will mostly need to unlock doors or push levers. You will rarely need to reference files to get hints for puzzles, and will not need to rack your brain too hard or too often. This is one of the rare negatives I have for the game. Puzzles are a bit too simple, and I would like to have more of them, and I would have liked for them to be more complex. Spread around the game are various documents or files, some containing hints for puzzles, safe locations, or interesting lore, like the info on B.O.Gs, bioorganic weapons, like the liquor or zombie dogs, which appear only once in a scripted bike ride. That is admittedly cool and refreshing, meaning the zombie dogs. Files have always been a staple of Resident Evil games, and I am glad to see Resident Evil 9 Requiem is no different in that regard. As is tradition with Resident Evil games, after completion you will be able to buy new weapons, costumes, view models and artwork and so on. you will need to spend CP. That's completion points, alright? CP stands for completion points, okay? Which can be gained by completing various challenges in the game. Some of which are completed simply by playing and completing the game, while some are more specific, like unlocking a drawer with a lockpick or opening every safe in the game, both examples of optional challenges. Some abilities like unlimited ammo are very fun, and combined with the new available weapons that can be bought with completion points and can be used from the very start in subsequent playthroughs, and suffice to say the game has good excuse for multiple playthroughs and good replay value. Another great thing about the game is the art direction and graphics. The game looks amazing and is very detailed, apparent from the start when Grace walks through the streets of Runwood, especially on a PS5 Pro. Sadly, I played only on a base PS5. Posters of concerts and missing persons everywhere, shop displays, rain puddles and cars driving by, people working, talking or rushing by, cigarette ads, a very immersive atmosphere, and what feels like a busy lived-in city. This is the only time that you will see a city full of life in the game, not to be too depressing. But in other areas, the graphics, camera angles, weather effects like rain or thunder, which scared me more times than I'd like to admit, also create a very horror-like and immersive atmosphere, most apparent when playing with Grace, to the point that I was very nervous and tense when playing her sections, especially for the first time. Another area where the graphics shine through are the zombies and various other monstrosities you will face in the game. The way zombies' heads sometimes pop or limbs are torn off, the nasty gunshot holes left on their bodies, eyes sometimes hanging off, overall a great level of detail. Not to mention that the enemies themselves look very creepy and disturbing, along with their rotten bodies reacting to your shots. The living characters look great too. Their hair sways, the individual hairs on beards can be seen. In tense situations our main characters sweat bullets, especially Grace, with the veteran Leon being the more cool, collected and witty character. Their clothes get bloody and dirty when wounded and the like. The weapon models also look good, and the reload animations, or for example when pressing the reload button when the weapon is full and the character checks the bullet in the chamber. Nice detail. So the reload animations, like I was saying, are badass and make you feel cool. As another example of cool details, when you fire off say 2 shots from a pistol mag and then reload, the magazine that is missing those 2 rounds you fired will not be thrown away, as it would be with an empty magazine, but will be returned to the pouch. An awesome detail. There are 3 major areas or locations in the game, not counting the town and hotel from the very beginning of the game. Each location has a fitting horror atmosphere in Grace's sections, the lightning strikes, zombies voicing in the background, creepy statues that at first seem like big monsters, sort of how you see monsters in place of clothes stacked on a chair when you were a kid, but are revealed to be harmless when approached. Of course, as is tradition, this Resident Evil game also features a lab in which man-made horrors are created and where inevitably an outbreak happens. The biggest issue in the lab for me is that it lacks sliding doors that make that cool sound when opening closing. One particular area is a blast from the past and is a bit sad to see in its ruined state, although it still looks great, with multiple familiar areas and locations known to players that played the older games, causing nostalgia. Music is very sparse, intensified in tense moments, but forgettable in my opinion. Voice acting is good. Grace's voice was the best, delivering great dialogue, selling me on how she was very anxious and afraid when dealing with the situation she's in, especially when attacked by stronger enemies. Leon Kennedy's voice actor also turned in a great performance. Other characters speak very little, but they still sound good. The voice acting overall is done well. Now, for my biggest gripe with the game, the narrative and characters. Resident Evil games were never narrative-driven experiences, but after existing for decades, there are no excuses for Capcom to not put in more effort into this. Victor Gideon, the ex-Umbrella scientist, from the beginning of the game, kidnaps Grace. Never mind the fact that the new outbreak that Victor caused in Renwood is never mentioned or resolved in the game. Maybe a solution or cleanup is hinted at the ending. Because he kidnapped Grace because she is the key to Elpis. Elpis is mentioned throughout the game, and only at the end it is revealed what it truly is. There is a weak attempt of a background story, so to say, with a criminal organization called the Connections, what a name, led by one of the Umbrella founders, and the Umbrella Corporation itself fighting each other for control. Vague and weak. At the end of the first playthrough, you unlock a document called Grace's Report that summarizes the story, and when you read it all at once, you realize even more how much the story is weak. As for the characters, we have Zeno, a Timu version of a Wesker-like character, complete with an emo look. He is evil and wants power. Wow, so deep. The story consists of Leon chasing after Grace to rescue her and finding a solution for his problem. These two birds are conveniently killed with one stone, and the rest of the narrative in the game is comprised of nostalgia and member berries. A very weak narrative, with a small twist at the end, found in a choice offering two endings, though the non-canon ending is lame and short, almost not worth being put in the game. Even our two main characters aren't really that deep or developed, with Leon at least having some history in the franchise and being the more quippy of the two. I derived all the pleasure from the gameplay and atmosphere. The narrative was very weak and had little to do with my enjoyment of the game. Okay, let's recap. Let's get the bad things out of the way first. So like I said, the characters are pretty shallow and dull, especially side characters. The narrative is simplistic and undeveloped. The music is pretty forgettable. Puzzles are too rare, and I would have liked to have more complex puzzles. On to the good stuff. The graphics are great, character models are detailed, environments are varied enough, and the atmosphere created by the sounds, weather effects, with the occasional effective jump scare. Voice acting is good, especially for Grace and Leon. Others do a good job too. The mix of horror-like resource-constrained sections with Grace on one end, and the action-packed, though not too much action, fun rather than tense sections with Leon, with a wide array of weapons, make for an almost perfect mix. I thought I would find the swaying between these two completely different gameplay types bothersome, but not at all. Capcom nailed the balance perfectly. After completing tense-filled, bullet-sweating sections with Grace, it was fun and kind of relaxing to go back to Leon and kick ass. In the same fashion, just as I was starting to get annoyed with the action sections, Grace came back. A new dimension of combat is added with Leon, since you can use your axe or hatchet for melee combat and can use the melee weapons that killed enemies had against them. Zombies have a semblance of personalities and their jobs now, making unique game mechanics such as switching lights on or off to distract zombies also makes the zombies more unique, interesting, human and creepy. Certain enemies, while not exactly boss fights, are stronger and unique, like the Cook, the Trunk brothers, one for each character to contend with, Leon's being an actual boss fight. Lickers are here too, the very cool looking enemy soldiers, Lekane, etc. Enemies are interesting and varied. The boss fights, while gameplay wise aren't anything special, except maybe two boss fights where parrying is key, are cool and fun. Replay value is good, considering you can use completion points after completing challenges in the game and can buy character models, artwork and new weapons or gameplay features, like unlimited ammo. The game has cool details, like the fact that magazines with only a few bullets fired are returned to a magazine pouch rather than being thrown away after reloading. As is tradition, throughout the game files are spread about, a few containing hints for puzzles and some providing interesting lore details. In my opinion, Resident Evil 9 Requiem is better than Resident Evil 7 and 8, though still having some issues, like a poor narrative, shallow characters and a lack of challenging puzzles, and puzzles in general, which I would really like Capcom to address. The music is also dull and unnoticeable for the most part. If only one of these issues were properly addressed, I think Resident Evil Requiem would be a 10 out of 10 game. As it is, I give Resident Evil 9 Requiem a 9 out of 10. A great game still. Okay guys, that's gonna be it for this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. Let me know down in the comments below, do you agree with my take on this game? Have you played it yet and what do you think of it? Until next time, see ya.